Sun Tzu said, "The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin."
I think there are so many fantastic stories in our past, so why make up new stories?
They are the punishment elite, born to compete, never retreat. No division. Living or dead, always ahead, fed by your dread.
Welcome back, Chuckle Fucks and Uncle Chucks. It is time to talk about the band that rhymes war with 1944. We are talking about Sabaton, the band that is known for their historical themes, their war themes, and their heavy metal themes. So the thing about Sabaton is, of course, the history thing that everyone talks about, how they make tons of songs about war and fighting and dying. But the thing is that makes me love Sabaton so much, and really the real reason why us Sabaton fans exist, and that we're not just history fans, is that Sabaton makes good music. It's not just generic run-of-the-mill shit, and it's not even like as power metal-ish as people give them credit for. Honestly, they really have that tried and true 80s traditional metal feel with a bit of keyboards, but we love them because of the good music that they write. But, you know, the good, interesting lyrics and historical themes do definitely buff them up a little bit and gets people's interests piqued a little bit. You wanna fucking know a little bit about what's going on. And another reason why I like this band, in fact, love this band, in fact, they're one of my favorite metal bands, which may surprise a lot of you, is because Joachim Broden, the main man of the band, the main songwriter, he started off as the keyboard player until the other band members swindled him into being the vocalist against his will, and has stayed that way ever since, and become one of the greatest frontmen of all heavy metal. He has a super distinct, unique voice. He's got that gruff, low thing that makes Sabaton, once again, not really fit as much into the European power metal realm. Maybe closer to some of the bands like Primo Victoria, I guess, but, you know, they sound a bit German, which is weird, because for the longest time, I thought the band was German, you know, because they had that low, distinct, gruntal vocal thing that's similar to, say, like Rammstein or even Accept. So for the longest time, I thought they were, you know, amongst those ranks with Accept, Udo, you know, but they're actually a Swedish metal band. So Joachim does definitely sound a bit like Udo, that's for sure. More like Udo if he was like a cheeseburger. But Joachim still does a killer job and has a super unique voice. Now this early lineup is completed with two guitar players. We got Rickard Sundin, Oscar Montelius, and then we also have the drummer known as Richard Larson. But a really important player that would stay with Joachim throughout the years in the band as the primary songwriters. Joachim usually writing all the riffs, the bulk of the lyrics, but you know, you also have Per Sundström, the bass player, historian of the band, and usually kind of acts as a manager. So they started making some demos. They got rid of their drummer, Richard Larson, got Daniel Mulbeck. They made Demo Fist for Fight. You know, shit was starting to go down with this band. And then they finally got signed to make their first album, but it is extremely different than what we know Sabaton as, and it's not technically their first album, but we'll get to that.
They were playing black or death metal covers or something like that. And I just thought that, well, I'll join because I got no other band. I came in as a keyboard player, not as a singer. Mm-hmm. And a couple of weeks into that, the rest of the band found out, oh, you write songs? And I'm like, yeah, but it's a different style. They liked the songs, and then they said, oh, can you sing the melody so we know where we are? Yeah, sure, I said, but we gotta find a singer. That was 15 years ago, and they still haven't found a fucking singer.
So Metalizer was recorded and intended to be released around 2002, but was shelved for several years and released in 2007 after the band had already had a couple albums under their belt and was already getting attention. So this album was almost kind of an afterthought. A lot of people just straight up ignore it because not only is the music it's good, but it's not nearly as good as the songs that they would write later on, riffs-wise, even like catchiness-wise. And the most notable thing missing from this album compared to the other ones, which just make people say it's not even canon, fuck it, it's not canon, is that the lyrics have fuck all to do with military history or history of any sort. It's just your typical, I'm metal, I wear leather, and I have spikes, and I have battle vetted jest. What the fuck is this shit? No one wants to hear about your heavy metal warriors and your wheels of fire and your hells of burning or whatever the fuck this stupid shit is. We want battles, war, death, and dyings, okay? Honestly, you know, if you just want your typical speed metal with a couple keyboard sounds going on, this album is probably a much more up your alley than maybe later Sabaton, especially if you just can't fucking stand what they're known for. Maybe give this album a try. So for some reason, the label had them record the album. They're like, oh, it's good, boys, and then they didn't fucking release the stupid thing. So, what the hell? Why would you do that? So they just shelved the fucking album, not even the band. But the band weren't even happy with it anyways. They're like, you know, fuck it, this sucks. This direction's boring. They don't like the lyrics. It feels like we're just half-assing this shit. We need something to inspire us.
In 2004, me and Per were sitting, and I had written the music for the song called Primo Victoria, and it had a big epic sound to it. So I decided, talked to me and Per, and we said, we need a big sound. Or a big topic, because there's a big sound in this music. So we decided, landing at Normandy Beach, you know, the Allied invasion, and it's the beginning of the end of World War II, and it's probably one of the first victories, which is Primo Victoria means. So we started to sing about D-Day, and we had to do a little bit of research. I mean, obviously we knew it's on the 6th of June 1944, but we did some more research, and then all of a sudden it was so interesting to write the lyrics also, because before it was music and then, oh yeah, I gotta have something to sing as well, and you wrote some lyrics. Now it was really interesting. So we decided, let's make an album about war.
The band decided to opt for more of a historical wartime themes with the music, and honestly, because of that change, it all of a sudden created much better music. Now, honestly, history sucks, okay? Now, a lot of you are going to say, especially Sabaton fans, what the fuck are you talking about? Sabaton and history are fucking, yes, but that's because Sabaton talks about war history. Go back to your social studies class, your history class. Your ass was asleep the entire time in that class, unless they were talking about war or watching a movie about war. Even if it was another movie, you'd fall asleep. Like, who gives a fuck? You know, they're talking about women's suffrage. They're talking about the fucking right to vote. They're talking about, you know, the fucking the pre-stuff before the Civil War. Oh my God, there's tensions. Ooh, who cares? The Cold War. Ooh. But when World War II happens, World War I happens, the fucking class explodes. You get to watch some good-ass movies. You get to watch some crazy shit, all right? It's especially for us Americans the best when we start talking about the American Revolution, because then we just get our fucking dicks off to that. We watch The Patriot with the greatest actor of all time, Mel Gibson. Watch him tomahawk some bitches in the head. But anyways, history, war history is the best kind of history. And this band was smart enough to realize that, and they went far with it. Unbelievably, even though this album was like a breakthrough album in the realms of European 2000 metal, the thing is that they didn't have that well promotion. I mean, it was Black Lodge Records. Who the fuck has heard of them? But the thing is that is undeniable is just look up any Sabaton song on YouTube and you will find a million fan-edited videos. The reason Sabaton is so huge is because not just word of mouth. We're talking word of text. We're talking they're the internet age metal band. They made their name by sharing information all over the internet. We're talking YouTube videos. We're talking back when MySpace was the thing. They really got fans to actually want to fucking participate in a way. They made their own videos. They found footage of battles and they put it over the songs. And speaking of the songs, we got so many damn good ones on here. I mean, this may be one of my least favorite albums, but you could still play damn near the whole thing live and it would blow people's minds. Primo Victoria, the song that changed it all, about the Battle of Normandy, the storming of the beaches, D-Day. And then you have two songs that are kind of interlinked in a way. You have Reign of Terror and Panzer Battalion. Now, how are they interlinked, you might want to know? Well, one of the songs has to do with the old Iraq War, the Persian Gulf incidents, and then we have the modern Iraq War. So it's kind of nice to have both those songs, different eras, and put them back to back and talk about different things about those two conflicts. A song I particularly like on here is Into the Fire, which has to do with the war in Vietnam and napalm bombings of airplanes just eviscerating the goddamn forest. And the reason I love the song so much is not just because it's a good song. Lyrically, it's interesting because Sabaton rarely talks about the Vietnam War, because of course they have to talk about tons of global conflicts. The Vietnam War is my favorite war. It's awesome. It's so cool. I love the Vietnam War. I support the Vietnam War. I'm just kidding, but the Vietnam War is super interesting, and I love that they did a song about it.
Ready to strike. A creature of the night. Into the fire.
Now, my favorite song on here is one that is kind of polarizing. This is either people's favorite or usually their least favorite song on the album. That is Stalingrad. Now, Stalingrad's a progressive song. It's got heavy moments. It's got tons of atmosphere. And the Battle of Stalingrad alone has so much room for interesting topics to talk about. We're not talking about a battle that lasts one day. The Battle of Stalingrad. We're talking about a battle that lasted several months, into the winter months in Russia, where the Germans were taking a Russian city and just eviscerating the Russian soldiers there. But the Russians just kept constantly reinforcing it, refused to move, went into the winter months, and the Germans were freezing to death. Their tanks, oils were freezing, everything. It was a total, utter fucking nightmare. And at that one city, the Russians turned the entire tide of World War II. Now, the only chink in the armor other than the Sabaton itself is the fact that Sabaton in these early days have this horrible disease. And I'm not talking about the coronavirus. I'm talking about this fucking putrid, awful idea of let's do metal tribute songs. Now, I don't understand how you'd want to get away from doing your generic metal topics on your first album that you shelved and then proceed to make songs that are even more pathetic by directly referencing lyrics and making me physically fucking cringe. Now, I get why people like these songs. I mean, I guess it's kind of cool to tribute to your gods or whatever the fuck, but look, those should have been bonus tracks, no matter what. They don't fit with the tone of the album. They completely derail it. And to me, those songs just suck fucking poop. So the band went on to make their next album with Black Lodge. Before they did that, they decided to round out the lineup because they can't just have, you know, you wake and play keyboards and do vocals at the same time and try to hold that shit together. So they decided to recruit a keyboard player, Daniel Muir. And when he came into the band, the keyboards were a little bit more prevalent, a little bit more technical too, especially in this classic era of Sabaton.
Primo Victoria was stopped for release in Germany. Yeah, it was blocked. It's just 1 week before the release that they approved it. Because of the word Nazi in the first song. We had to send the lyrics in to have them look at it. And then they of course realized that it's about D-Day. Okay, cool, then we can release it. So the record label told us, next time you make an album, make sure you don't put the word Nazi in the intro. Okay, we said, so we put it in the first verse.
Attero Dominatus, Berlin is burning, denique interimo.
This is usually considered to be Primo Victoria Part 2. And kind of a generic just recapturing of that. Honestly, yeah, there's not much different things going here. Even I, a Sabaton dick sucker, kind of have to admit, like, they're not really reinventing the wheel with this one. But you know what? In some ways, it's a little bit more consistent. It's a little bit more up-tempo. And I kind of would rather listen to this one all the way through, because there's some songs on Primo, other than that shit-ass metal tribute song, that they slow the pace down a bit, but this one, I feel, keeps it chugging along, even at the literal slower paced songs, like the really cool, interesting song called The Rise of Evil. It's a really lengthy epic that breaks down how Hitler came to power. But Sabaton does disappoint. Got another metal tribute song on here. Last track. Once again, I guess it's the best of those tributes. Metal Crew. It's a little less cringy, but I mean, you come in with that chorus and you say, the priest killed the maiden in the metal church, and I just want to fucking die, okay? Stop it with this shit! But we have A Light in the Black other than the song A Light in the Black, and that they have one of the greatest songs of their entire career on this album. We're talking awesome 80s traditional metal, catchy killer riffage, and awesome catchy choruses. A song that's based upon the Falklands War, which is a little mini war that happened between Argentina and the United Kingdom over the Falklands Islands. We're of course talking about Back in Control.
We are back in control. Force them to surrender. Take what is ours. Restore law and order.
So then it was around this time the band finally released Metalizer off the shelves, but they would follow that up with what many argue to be their single greatest album of all time. And it's hard to dispute that because, goddamn, as we're about to get into, the track listing on this motherfucker is pretty much a best of compilation.
There's starting to come in emails from around the world, not only saying that Sabaton is a good band, I like the music, but you're actually the best band I listen to. And when you get that from several people, that it's not your mom or your best friend or other people that is related to you, that is kind of when I started to think that, okay, if we are some person's best band in the world and they're dying to see us live, then we should just get a little bit more exposure and see if there are more people that think that Sabaton is the best thing for them.
Now, the Art of War album is somewhat of a concept album in the sense that a lot of these songs follow themes set up by Sun Tzu's book known as The Art of War, which is a book that's really well written and still, with modern combat, still holds up today with strategies. And it goes through several kind of modern battles in more World War II and World War I, and demonstrates how well these themes in the book have actually translated into modern times. Now, in between each track, there actually is a little narration that's based off of the book, directly from Sun Tzu's writing. Now, the band could pretty much play any song off of this live. It has like all of their classics. I mean, Jesus. Ghost Division opens it, alright? Now, Ghost Division is so good as an opener that they play it as the opening song all the time. And for making this episode, I've had to watch so many live performances of Sabaton. I'm sick of them, right? And I've listened to the song so many times, it's unbelievable. But I'm going to tell you right now, every single time this song comes on, just the intro, you can put it on loop every time, the hairs on my fucking arm stick up like I was shot with a bolt of lightning every time. There's just something so energetic about the song, and I just have to put it on every time, and I am not sick of it. It is probably my favorite Sabaton song. It is the opening song of this episode. Without question, I don't even have to think about it. And it doesn't even drop off from there. We have the title track, The Art of War, one of their best damn songs. And then, of course, the classic, 40-1. We're talking high-speed velocity riffage, amazing lyrics. Now, with World War II when it started and the Germans were blitzkrieging all nearby nations, people kind of tend to ignore that part of the history and just go to the fact that Germany was expanding and then they just started war with the UK and then Russia. But the thing is that Germany had to take over several of those countries, and they did put up fights, especially Poland. Now, Poland did get the short end of the stick by being one of the first nations to be brutally invaded by them. They stood 40-1 against the Germans. Well, actually, the Germans stood 40-1 against them, but they wish they stood 40-1 against the Germans, but they fought to the last damn man. And we'll get to a song later about how even though Poland got absolutely butt-raped, eviscerated, they never gave up, even when they were being occupied by the Germans. Now, another interesting song I want to talk about on here is Cliffs of Gallipoli, which is about the Gallipoli campaigns from World War I. It's a really great song, really catchy song. Got them a music video for it, you know. But the thing is that, as I've kind of shown in a past retrospective, the Sabotage episode, this song is really, 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 really similar to a song from that band called Gutter Ballet. Therefore, it is plagiarism, and I'm giving you a 0 on this assignment. Now, I'm not that retarded, okay? Anyone that would say that just because they're somewhat similar and have a little bit of the same type of feel going on, that they're literally the same song, gotta be one of the dumbest people to walk the face of the earth. Now, most of these songs are focused on World War II, but one song definitely highlights the horrors. And I'm not talking about your mom, I'm talking about the horrors of World War I. We're talking about, of course, The Price of a Mile, focusing mostly on the Battle of Passchendaele, how just absolutely brutal World War I was. Now, World War II, because it was a little more recent, and you know, you have Hitler and stuff like that, it's a little bit more famous. People tend to think it's worse, but you could make a strong argument that the actual battles of World War I were so much more horrific. You literally had to run across miles of open fields just to get shot by machine guns, just to maybe try to make it to the other trench. It was brutal. You had rats all over the place, eating your eyeballs out, pooping all over you. You rotted in them damn trenches. You couldn't even get a new pair of shoes, or let alone socks. But my favorite song on here is a song that's focusing on this battle in World War II known as the Battle of Kursk. Right after the Battle of Stalingrad, where the Germans spent months and months and months trying to push further into Russia and got their asses absolutely handed to them by Russia, the Germans then just sent almost their entire army, like total morons, to try to like push back the Russians again. Well, the Russians decided to send their entire army and a new built army of tanks after the winter months were over, and it was the single biggest clash of soldiers and tanks ever recorded. And we're talking about the mammoth of a song and the mammoth of a riff, Panzerkampf.
Into the motherland, the German army marched. Comrades, side by side, to stop the Nazi charge.
And then you even have great bonus tracks on here, Swedish Pagans. I mean, okay, this album is arguably the best starter album if you want to get into the band. I mean, if you just really can't stand keyboards, I might argue something later down the road, maybe even the next album, because pretty much everything after this brings the guitars much more up in the mix, makes them sound more crunchy, and brings the keyboards down. So it makes this kind of a bygone era now. But to me, this is definitely like the best collection of their easiest to digest songs by far. Now, one last funny thing I wanted to bring up is there's a little track at the end called A Secret. Now, it begins with your typical Sun Tzu narration, and then at the end, it randomly has a robot voice that says,
Illegal download detected. Executing spyware protocol 666.
Now, I was scared shitless as a kid because I didn't exactly pirate the album, but I kind of stole it via YouTube download, where I just downloaded every single song. I know, we were all stupid. We went through that era where we thought we just download every song off YouTube. Now we, of course, use uTorrent because we're smart people. So that scared me shitless. It's like, oh my God, is my iPod, my little iPod Nano, gonna get a virus on it now? So even though they tried to make me shit my pants at the end of the album in fear, I gotta give them credit and say that this album is a total fucking masterpiece, okay? And although this is getting towards the end of what many consider to be the classic era, to me, this is the first album from them that I hold to be God tier.
Singing about dragons, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not gonna touch people in the same way. Everybody has a real relationship to tanks. Everybody's seen it on TV, you know, and I get scared if tanks come up to me. I will get scared. Somebody threatens me with a dragon, yeah, bring on the dragons.
Coat of Arms is not only one of their strongest albums, I would maybe even make the case that it is their strongest, because if we compare the songs on it to even Art of War, anything after, it just obliterates. Every song is fucking massive except, I'm about to fucking go off. So there's a reason why this album is not their best, and I really don't want to talk about it. We're gonna have to get to that in a bit. So before I get fucking super pissed and throw this goddamn chair across the room, let's get into the good things about this album. Let's get happy, okay? Let's get fucking happy. So the good thing is that this album is mostly a concept album, which will start a string of concepts from the band, with the exception of one song, which we will fucking get to. This album is almost entirely based on World War II. Every single song is focused in the realms of World War II. This album was heavily promoted. They signed at Nuclear Blast. Now, Nuclear Blast records, they usually suck, okay? But the thing about Nuclear Blast records is that they sound good. Their albums sound good when they're in the realms of traditional metal, speed metal, and even power metal. That type of music actually works well with big production, big loud shit, loud reverb-drenched drums. But the thing is that it does not work with thrash or death metal. So stop signing to Nuclear Blast if you're a thrash band, because you ruin your fucking sound. But it was promoted heavily. We've got music videos. Now the fan base is just awry, and they're making so many fan-made videos, it's ridiculous. Once again, this damn thing reads like a greatest hits. Coat of Arms, the opening track. I mean, are you kidding me? Midway. Motherfucking Midway, one of the most underrated songs, killer riff. And this song is based on a battle that turned the tides of the war in the Pacific for the United States against Japan. Now, Japan just came in and blew the crap out of Pearl Harbor. They started the attack, and they were planning on invading from that point on. They were moving ships in, they were getting an invading army, and we barely had anything to counter them. We had damaged aircraft carriers. What could we do? Well, in the Battle of Midway, with a little bit of luck and our bombers getting lost in the clouds, they came in, swooped down, dive bombed the Japanese aircraft carriers when they thought the bombers were all gone, with all their bombs and all their planes on the deck. You got the super aggressive Screaming Eagles, which is about the Battle of the Bulge, and not my Bulge. We're talking about the Battle of the Bulge. Awesome winter battle. Got General Patton out there. Now you also have some other really good songs in here, like Aces in Exile, which is about the Battle of Britain. We're talking aerial dogfights of planes. We're talking about people that joined the British Air Force at the time that were from all over the place. There were refugees that were getting chased out by Germany, and they wanted to make a stand, a final stand. And not only did the Russians stop the Germans from advancing any further, the Brits stopped them too, thanks to the help of many Aces in Exile. But one song I gotta highlight. We gotta bring back the theme of the Polish people getting screwed over by the Germans at this time. All the time, no matter what, there were rebels fighting the German military police, and they did not stop. The song Uprising is how it turned into a complete powder keg at the end of World War II. The Germans just couldn't hold it any longer. The rebellion was much too strong. And this is the song that I quote at the beginning of the episode. They rhyme war with 1944. And I don't know if that is the coolest or cheesiest shit in the world, but this is by far my favorite song for it.
War song, city at war, voices from underground, whispers of freedom, 1944.
You also have two really interesting songs that are highlighting the horrors, and I'm not talking about your mothers again. We're talking about the horrors of the Holocaust as well as the German Blitzkrieg. And we have the Final Solution based on the Holocaust itself. This song may have a bit of a power ballad feel, but there's tons of melancholy to be felt. And you also have the song Wehrmacht, which takes a different approach. This song is heavy as all hell, about as heavy as Stalingrad, maybe even heavier. But the thing about this song that's interesting is lyrically, they kind of take a very not politically correct position that got them in trouble in several countries, especially Germany. Now, the truth of the matter is that in World War II, a lot of German soldiers were not the Waffen SS that were just evil, scumbag piece of shit military police that would, do most of the atrocities like the Holocaust and rounding up people and just, being piece of shit, scumbag military police, okay? We're talking about just normal conscripted soldiers. And there was a draft. So there was tons of people, obviously there was tons of people that were brainwashed and just doing war crimes even as just, the normal German soldiers. But the German army, the Wehrmacht, had tons of people that were just following orders and forced to follow orders. A lot of these people were drafted and had no choice but to join and fight for the German army and be the bad guys. Now, obviously, a lot of Wehrmacht committed war crimes. That's pretty obvious what happened with Russia. But the deal is that everyone just paints every German soldier in World War II as a Nazi, and that's really unfair, especially to all of those that did not believe in things like the final solution.
What about the man executing order?
And then you have one of my favorite songs of the album with a killer riff, one of their best songs, White Death, which is based on a farmer, a Finnish farmer in the Winter War that was fighting off tons and tons of German soldiers. One farmer, one man, killing so many soldiers that they literally carpet bombed the forest that he lived in just to try to kill him, and all they could do is disfigure his face. Now, to many of you that are familiar with this band and know their songs, you must be thinking, well, geez, if this is the track listing here, this is a best of compilation once again. Well, fuck it. Fuck it. The band decided we're not going to make this album pure and perfect. We're going to tank the pool. We're going to just go in the fucking swimming pool. We're not even going to piss in it. We're just going to take a big fat shit in the pool. And that song is called Metal Ripper. Not only is this another stupid fucking tribute song, which makes me want to die when I put it on, it's the worst one. The good news is that this is the last of its kind, at least for now. You better not make another one, I swear to fucking... And for the next album, they decided not to just do another World War II, World War I, World War III. They decided to make an entire concept album based on the Swedish Empire.
When we started to write the Carolus Rex album, there was a lot of people who did not believe in this topic at all. They said you should stay to the World War II where more people are excited about and things like that. And you cannot do an album in Swedish, who would listen to it? We were convinced that this will be our biggest success to date. And now, a couple of years later, I'm very, very happy to see that we were right.
Now, I was a big Sabaton fan for a long time, but the weird thing is I kind of stopped listening to this band and fell out of love with them around when this album came out. And I heard some songs, I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. Boy, why did I ever give up around that time? That was so stupid. So Carolus Rex is their, by far, biggest commercial success. It went 4 times platinum in Sweden. Why? Because they focused entirely on Swedish history. We're talking about the Swedish Empire. We're talking about the Lion of the North. We're talking about King Charles. We're talking about Carolus Rex, okay? Long live the king. Now, the one drawback to this is that it's hard for me to learn or kind of give a shit as a stupid American about Swedish history, and it definitely connects with the Swedish fan base a lot more. I still appreciate the album, but it's hard for me to kind of understand it and appreciate it as much. And it's even harder when there's Swedish versions of the album where the entire thing is sung in Swedish. But no matter what, this album is musically a behemoth. Many consider it to be their greatest of all, and it is probably the most consistent. I mean, it opens Lion of the North. Lion of the North, and then you get Gut mit uns. And the whole album does not let up. It just keeps going and it keeps kicking our ass. 1648. Where can you go from here? I know where you can go from here. Killing Grounds, and then you have Poltova, my favorite song on the album. So catchy and so unique, even for them. It's really a catchy song that stands out even in their huge discography. One thing though that I kind of have to bitch about that keeps me from listening to this as an album experience more often than some of their other albums is that there's quite a lot of slow songs in here, more than usual. And I'm not talking ballads, I'm talking like slow, dirgy metal songs. And I love slow, dirgy metal songs. But there's just kind of too many on here, and they kind of run together as well, and they're placed together. I think a big problem is just how the actual track list of the album is. But even those slow songs kick ass. I mean, one of their best, most classic songs is, of course, the slow, dirgy, epic title track. But despite my minor bitching grievances about the album, I would say it's definitely one of their best albums. I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with it, but you definitely should eventually get to it, because many people, maybe even including myself, let's just think about that a little bit, hold this to be their greatest album, and it's definitely their highest selling one. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to outdo this one. But despite their continuous success and hitting it big with this album, everyone for some reason decided to dart from the band like someone farted, except for Joachim and Parr, and he who smelt it dealt it.
It was really tough because, you know, it's everybody wants to be a rock musician at any price when you're 18. And when you're around 30, wife, kids, the idea of being on the road 250 days every year might not be the most appealing thing to you. So I mean, they have another band now they play, but on the other hand, they do about as many shows in two years as we do in a month or two. You know what I mean?
What's funny though is pretty much all those members that left formed their own band called Civil War. So the remaining two decided to fill out the lineup once again like a donut. We have the giant of a guitar player known as Chris Rorland, who's probably my favorite member of the band. He really does play some kick-ass guitar solos, and is probably the most talented member they've ever had. They also got another guitar player known as Thoby England, and they had a lot of random touring drummers at the time. They even had Snowy Shaw, which you guys may know if you're a Merciful Fate and King Diamond fan. And then they eventually landed on Hans Van Dahl to play drums. Now, like I said, this is kind of where I stopped listening to the band all those years ago. I did have Carolus Rex, but when it came to Heroes, I heard some of the singles and I just was not interested. But even when I started to fall back in love with the band in recent times, when I listened to Heroes, it was my least favorite album. It just did not click. But this album is definitely, of all their albums, a grower and not a shower.
Well, normally Sabaton sings about battles and tanks and bigger events, but this time we decided to focus in on individuals and do it on a more personal level.
Now, despite my problems I had in the past, Heroes might be quite possibly my favorite album from the band. And as an album, not just the songs, as an album, I tend to put this one on beginning to end the most these days. Now, I still do have some minor grievances with it. This album is definitely their most produced album, I would say, as in it's really loud, boisterous, nuclear blast production on full fucking effect. In fact, it feels even like they have some auto-tune on the vocals at points, and I'm not a big fan of that. That being said, though, I love the guitar sound, and the songs are undeniably great. And there's so many interesting, weird songs on here. They experiment a bit. You have Inmate 4859, which feels like a funeral dirge. It's so doomy and has cool keyboards. Love that song, super different. And then you even have the Ballad of Bull, symphonic ballad, very little heavy guitars to be heard, great singing, And this song's theme is about a guy that just ran back and forth into battle to just save men over and over and over again, and throwing himself into harm's way to do it. If you guys have ever seen that really awesome movie directed by Mel Gibson called, I almost said Heartbreak Ridge, that's not the same movie. We're talking about Hacksaw Ridge. Similar to that, not the same person, but that same type of deal. It's a great movie, directed by Mel Gibson. You can't go wrong. But even though you have like their softest song, the album opens with arguably their most in-your-face aggressive song. I mean, it's like their Fight Fire with Fire, Night Witches. That song just obliterates you even more than Ghost Division when it finally builds and comes in with some aggressive riffing and crazy loud symphonics and screaming chants. This song's based on an all-female group of Russian pilots known as the Night Witches. I love every song on here. If I had to pick a favorite, it'd kind of be a battle. I mean, every song of theirs is a battle. But we're talking either Resist and Fight, which is really good. It's almost like the 40-1, but for Belgium. But it gets a bit nudged out by the classic song that was definitely an experiment for them. All the band members told you, Wake 'em, this sounds like shit. And then he proved them wrong by making the hit single one of their most famous songs from the album that was inspired by a riff he wrote that sounded like a spaghetti western. So kind of a weird vibe going on here. It sounds like spaghetti western metal. We're of course talking about To Hell and Back, a song about the horrors of PTSD. It was nice for them to step out of their boundaries a bit, and it was rewarding. This is one of their most popular albums. With the next album, it feels like they kind of rekindle some of their old energy. And if you're a big fan of the classic era of the band, you will definitely love The Last Stand.
There's 10 stories on this album. They all connect to famous and not so famous last stands in history. That is basically a desperate fight where few people stand against difficult odds, to say at least.
Now, even though many fans consider this to be one of their weaker albums, they think it's generic or some shit, I actually think it's one of their strongest ones, bar none. Now, even though it shares the same title as the greatest X-Men movie of all time, we're talking about an album that has a theme that's pretty obvious, The Last Stand. It's about last stands and battle. You know, epic, famous last stands. The obvious one being the opening track, Sparta, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae. You've seen the movie 300. It's one of the greatest comic book adaptations of all time. Horrifically over-exaggerating the actual battle, but 300 Spartans did stand against the entire Persian army at the narrow hot gates and held on for dear life. Now, what I love about this album is that the vocals are a little bit more raw, gruffer. They don't have nearly as much effects on them. And it sounds kind of like the old days, as well as the riffing on here is really killer at the same time. And a lot of the songs, even though they sound a bit rehashy of the classic days, it seems kind of welcome at the same time. You got killer songs in here like Last Dying Breath, The Blood of the Bannockburn, right after the events of the death of William Wallace, which, of course, all of you out there that are well-versed in the greatest actor of all time, Mel Gibson, would know from the movie Braveheart. Right after the events of Braveheart, this song takes place, and it's got bagpipes and all. We got songs in here that don't just feel like great heavy riffage and rekindling of the classic days, like, you know, Stalingrad, how heavy that song was. We have songs in here that almost feel like speed metal in attitude. Rourke's Drift and Hill 3234.
Hold your ground when you fight to those who fight. This is waiting on the hill. No surrender, shoot to kill.
See, those two songs may have been my favorite songs of the album until you get to a song that sounds pretty similar to The Art of War. I mean, they are definitely rekindling that fire that they had with that song, but I feel is even better. We're talking about a song about Polish cavalry, the Winged Hussars.
The winged hussars arrive. Coming down the mountainside.
One last thing I want to talk about is there's an interesting track on here called The Lost Battalion, or if you think like, man, the drums really sound weird on this song. You see, this song's played with electronic drums, but instead of sampling actual drums, for each part of the set, they sampled different sounds of war, like a grenade, a knife, a handgun, a machine gun. So after this album, Thoby England left, and they got Tommy Johansson, who's a good Christian boy, which filled out the lineup to this current time, this current day. Now, I swear to God, if you change that on me, I'm going to look like a liar. And I don't like being accused of being a liar, okay? So this lineup is by far their most technical, best lineup. Now, at this time, the band started marketing their ever-loving asses off. They made a music video to promote World of Tanks with the song Primo Victoria. Really cool music video of You Wake 'Em in a tank. And then they decided to team up with this one friend of theirs that was a historian, a big fan of World War I, to make a history channel to dive deeper into the themes of the songs. They'd play a song throughout the episode and actually break down the real world history in detail of that actual battle. Now, there's very few metal-related YouTube channels I even like or subscribe to, but I say, even if you don't like Sabaton, even if you don't like metal, if you like just interesting history and stuff about war, this is like the best channel on YouTube to go for. They do such a damn good job, it's unbelievable. So then the band hit their anniversary. To celebrate it, they made a music video called Bismarck, as well as it was a promotion for the game World of Warships, and it is one of the most killer, catchy, and even different songs. Once again, they're still, for their own kind of boxed in area of just being kind of traditional metal, anthem metal with, you know, power metal tinges, they still find little ways, little nuggets to get outside of that box and be creative.
To lead the war machine, to rule the waves and lead the Kriegsmarine.
Now, a funny story around this time is that Manowar had pulled out of Hellfest, and they were supposed to be the headlining act over some stupid bullshit reason. Carl Logue was probably on the hunt for some cheese pizza, so they had to get a quick replacement. They got Sabaton in a day after You Wake 'Em blew out his voice, and they still had the balls to go up there and perform their whole set with the guitar players singing the songs. And you just had You Wake 'Em with fans and friends sitting on the stage with a fucking picnic table, eating food and drinking drinks. This just shows that even without the main man, You Wake 'Em, this band still chugs along and doesn't skip a beat whatsoever and still remains awesome and true. Now, a lot of their past albums have focused heavily on World War II. So for the next one, the band decided, let's make an entire concept album based on the unsung World War. We're talking about World War I, the Great War.
Now, as we were coming up to the 100 years anniversary of the Armistice Day, we thought, okay, if there's a good timing in history, it's now. Because we were discussing several topics when we were sitting last summer and talking, me and our singer Joachim, about what topics we're gonna have on the coming album. We had several of them, but we thought the only one that has a timed event attached to it is this one.
Obviously, we've had a lot of these topics on our mind before. We touched on the Great War or World War I earlier in songs like Cliffs of Gallipoli, The Price of a Mile, Angels Calling, Lost Battalion and such. So it's not news for us. We've been there before, but it felt right now to do it.
Great war, and I cannot take more. Great war, I keep on marching.
So World War I, the Great War, the war to end all wars, or so it was supposed to be, until World War II came in and was like, I'm gonna end this man's whole career. This album actually had a lot of interesting releases. There was like a weird narration edition that had narration of explaining the songs before the songs. And you even had a version of the album that was like an orchestral redo of every single song. I don't know what the hell the point of that version was, but no matter what, the album is still very, very, very solid. And of all of their recent albums, and in fact of all their albums, this is like by far their most collaborative. It has so many writing credits on the music beyond just You Wake 'Em on like almost every song. The Devil Dogs, We got 82nd all the way, that's focusing on the U.S. war hero, Alvin York, my dude. And they got the Red Baron, which is about the famous World War I air pilot that was kind of like a rock star of his time. Everyone knows of the Red Baron, and no, it's not just a shitty pizza brand. And you also have a really heavy song that has a really heavy subject matter about one of the darkest battles of the war, the Battle of Verdun. If you thought Passchendaele was bad, Verdun was probably just as bad. We're talking trench warfare once again, nasty stinking rats and mustard gas. And I'm not talking about the mustard you put on your hot dogs. We're talking about mustard gas that like rips your face apart and makes you die. And there's even a tiny bit of experimentation on this album with Attack of the Dead Men, which kind of feels like a Rammstein song with all the, you know, industrial effects going on. Now this song is based on some horrific tellings of Russian soldiers charging into battle covered in blood and muck, to the point that people thought that they were zombies of the undead. It was like a horror movie come to life in the battlefield. But despite the song making some changes for the band, most of the album is solid, but a little too solid. I mean, there's some songs on here that just sound like stuff they've already done before. And the most obvious example is actually my favorite song on the album, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which is a song about T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. We're talking about the conflict on the Eastern Front, all the way on the side of the Ottoman Empire. And this song is way too similar, way too similar to White Death. It is almost identical, but you know what? I don't even care. Once again, actually, even though they're like ripping themselves off hardcore, I actually prefer this song to White Death, as crazy as that may sound. So this brings us to the end of the road in the journey of Sabaton, at least for the moment. Now what's cool is around this time, the band has actually done a show at Wacken where they had almost all of the old members of the band all together playing Sabaton songs, and it was a great, epic celebration. And they should do that more often as one gigantic Sabaton family. Who knows what the future holds in store for Sabaton, but there are a few things that are for certain. War will be involved, and killer heavy metal songs will be produced.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No!